When Nintendo revealed its Nintendo Today app, one slight surprise I had was that amongst the option for aesthetics you can select, one was WarioWare. Perhaps this on its own doesn't seem astonishing until you consider that the list is pretty much in the order of Nintendo's key franchises. It starts with Mario and Zelda and goes on down through Animal Crossing, Splatoon, Pikmin, Kirby, Fire Emblem, Metroid, and Xenoblade. Right at the bottom we have Donkey Kong, but before this we have another Mario adjacent property. Not Yoshi, not even Wario himself, but WarioWare. It's not been the first time that Nintendo has launched something like this with one surprise IP included. Nintendo Labo launched with the standard alarm clocks for Mario and Zelda and others, but also chucked in a version for Ring Fit Adventure, a popular Nintendo franchise to be sure, but not one that we would usually think of as one of their top shelf brands, despite the game's outsized sales since its 2019 debut. But Ring Fit doesn't appear on this list, whereas WarioWare does. It's arguably the only time a single game series is called out. Wario is broader than just WarioWare after all, and I guess you could argue that Splatoon only has Splatoon series games to show for itself, but generally the franchises listed here represent a multitude of games and experiences beyond one single game series. So the inclusion of WarioWare as something bespoke is very telling and somewhat surprising. Firstly then, let's recap how recent WarioWare games did, and the answer is not enormously well by the standards of some of Nintendo's other titles. 2023's WarioWare Get It Together was last reported in 2022 as having sold a mere 1.34 million copies, suggesting that it's not really activating the hardcore fan interest like other franchises. Then 2023's WarioWare Move It had a poor launch in Japan reportedly, and numbers were not even reported by Nintendo, which is usually their way of saying that the game did not cross the 1 million sold threshold. Why then are they pushing it so much here? Why have I in fact been tipping more WarioWare for a while now? Well, firstly, the sales may be lower, but it's also clear that the development costs are also significantly lower. While game production does include some fixed costs such as cartridge manufacture and distribution, the most expensive element in most cases is surely the development of the titles themselves, and these microgames tend to have smaller staffs and to be produced at a faster pace than other games. Now, to be fair, they're also sold for lower prices than other games in Nintendo's oeuvre, but this is mostly, it seems, a response to market pressures. A Nintendo survey was spotted in the wild a few years ago asking what people might pay for a WarioWare game, and so they have obviously taken some care to price it according to the perception of value the game presents and what the market will allow. Still, that's not to say they don't have broader aspirations for Wario. I think Wario has historically posed something of a challenge for Nintendo. The original WarioLand game emerged during the 90s when platform games were almost the default type of video game. Spurred on by the twin successes of Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog, everybody from Ronald McDonald to Donald Duck could be guaranteed their own platform game, and the decision to use the Super Mario World series as a backdoor spin-off for Yoshi and the Super Mario Land series as a backdoor spin-off for Wario seems to have been a conscious attempt at brand expansion to make different types of platform games with different kinds of leads. But these days, platformers, while still big, check out the sales of the Super Mario Bros. Series if in doubt, are far from the only option available, and especially 2D platformers are rather more niche. Moreover, Nintendo already has an awful lot of platforming options for those so inclined. Look, I adore the original Wario Land, and I think it's one of the greatest titles the Game Boy put out. I would love nothing more than a Wario Land revival, but 2010's Wario Land Shake It seemed to be the footnote on that series, for the present time at least, and I can see why Nintendo would not rush back to it. That's not to say that they wouldn't be interested at all. After all, they've put a lot of work into reviving a very broad base of their franchises, and there's no reason not to capitalize on Wario in the same way. But Wario is kind of problematic in himself because he's essentially a pastiche of Mario, and Nintendo's sense of humor can be rather patchy. When they're trying to big up Mario, it's not necessarily in their interest to prioritize Wario for the time being. Now, once they've reached a point where the Mario cast is sufficiently well established, that might change, in particular if and when Mario shows up in a Mario movie, which surely has to be inevitable sooner or later. It would make all the sense in the world to promote Wario titles. He's still a familiar figure from the Mario Party, kart, and sports franchises. All that said, Nintendo titles generally rely on a core staff with experience of the title shepherding development, even if it's with a new team. Even the return of Famicom Detective Club relied on the presence of the original scriptwriter of The Girl Who Stands Behind, Yoshio Sakamoto. I've looked in a previous video, but it's not obvious that there is anybody really capable of mentoring a new dev team based on past Wario experiences, and while Goodfield did work on the last Wario title, their recent work has been more diverse in nature with games like Bakaru and Princess Peach Showtime. Until or unless Nintendo finds a development partner to work on Wario and has a strong advocate within EPD who can demonstrate a deep understanding of the DNA of these games, dormancy remains a strong possibility for WarioLand. Which brings us to WarioWare. Essentially, WarioWare is not just the character but the company, and therefore the whole suite of characters. Aesthetically, WarioWare is completely different from most Mario titles and therefore earns its place as a discrete franchise, at least to the same extent that Donkey Kong does. Even if WarioWare only encompassed one set of games, the group of characters have a lot of potential. Set aside games for a moment. What about animations? Wario and his wacky pals could make for an interestingly weird series. Perhaps micro animations telling weird stories and jokes. Perhaps aspiring to try and hit meme status or viral status, though this is something that Nintendo might be cautious about. However, this is the sort of thing that could be hosted on the Nintendo Today app. I mentioned in a previous video as well the concept of having micro games playable on the app itself. These sort of few-second games would be perfect for a daily app and could keep people coming back and enjoying the app while subtly raising the profile of the WarioWare series. But you might think, why bother raising the profile of a series that barely passed 1 million sales, even with the full beam power of the Switch effect? Well, I think they've identified that WarioWare's potential is actually huge. We know from Pikmin and Metroid that Nintendo can be stubborn and they like to stick with franchises and develop them as far as they can, even in the face of sales setbacks. But we can also see the sunny uplands. Check out Mario Party, an absolute juggernaut franchise. I doubt any of those games are individually or perhaps even collectively as expensive to make as a title like Super Mario Odyssey was, but the combined sales of the three Switch party games outpaces Odyssey. Plus, the party games reach into the living room space, activating the casual audience and bringing people together in social experiences connected to Nintendo, a hugely valuable part of their brand aspirations. We know that they've stuck with 1-2-Switch, and before that they've had success with casual titles like the Wii and Switch Sports series. Well, WarioWare has a different flavour than Switch Sports or Mario Party, but essentially it belongs to the same broad category of ultra-casual pick-up-and-play titles, and there's a great potential to involve a social component with these games. Get It Together was focused on the one-player experience, Move It was focused on physical play, but it strikes me that Nintendo are currently looking for massive multiplayer games, and Everybody 1-2-Switch and Super Mario Party Jamboree are just two examples of the genre. WarioWare has huge potential in this regard. It's not that every WarioWare game needs to do major numbers, but because they're cheap and quick to make, they can afford to keep going back to the well. It's also a series which can leverage new technology effectively, as we've seen in the past with Game & Wario. The chance that any individual title sparks into a hit may be low, but if the brand becomes familiar and they can get the marketing right, there is a chance that they can eventually blow one of them up. And for Nintendo, who love to cannibalize old content into new games, there is little risk because they can always find ways to scoop up these microgames and repackage them for future. So why then is WarioWare promoted so much on Nintendo Today but not on Alamo? And for that matter, where is the Ring Fit Adventure aesthetic for Nintendo Today? I think this is partly a recognition of the different audiences that these franchises are facing. a core audience is unlikely to be as bothered by a casual title like Ring Fit Adventure, while Alamo is designed to be a lifestyle accessory and Ring Fit Adventure is essentially a lifestyle game, so the overlap is far stronger. They could just promote everything all at once, but the risk then is that all the franchises get lost in the noise. Eventually, WarioWare is likely to come to Alamo and Ring Fit Adventure to Nintendo today, but that time isn't quite yet. I also think there's an element of testing these franchises out. They will get definitive data from Alamo about the take-up of the Ring Fit alarms. They will have similar data from Nintendo today about how many people use the WarioWare look. We know that Nintendo has a big five of franchises: Mario, Zelda, Animal Crossing, Splatoon, and Pikmin, pretty much in that order, perhaps with Donkey Kong in there somewhere. We know that Kirby, Fire Emblem, Metroid, and Xenoblade are a little bit further behind. We also know that there are franchises currently benched which they must surely want to resuscitate, Star Fox and F-Zero perhaps being the prime ones. However, there are a lot of franchises like WarioWare, Ring Fit Adventure, Tomodachi, and others which exist kind of in the periphery but do have great potential, and I can imagine Nintendo using these kinds of opportunities to give them a bit of a nudge just to test the waters. Sadly, I'm not optimistic for a new WarioLand as much as I'd love it, or even a remake of a classic one anytime soon. Though the fact that not all the past WarioLand games have come to NSO gives me at least some hope. But I have gone into both the history of Wario and a lot of the other Mario Universe characters in this video currently on the screen, so why not give that one a watch? Meantime, thank you so much for watching, thank you to my Patreon supporters, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.